The heat pressed down on the forward operating base like a heavy lid, trapping sound and sweat in equal measure. By 2:30 p.m., the air around the command building shimmered, and the generator outside hummed with a tired, mechanical patience that never seemed to break. Sandbags were stacked chest-high along the walls, and Jersey barriers funneled foot traffic into a narrow approach that left no room for wandering. The building looked plain, almost forgettable, which was exactly the point. At the front entrance, the entry control point sat exposed to the sun and the dust. A magnetometer stood under a faded canopy, next to a small table where badges were checked and returned in a steady rhythm. Boots scraped against gravel, identification cards flashed briefly, and the generator filled the gaps in conversation with its constant growl. Everything about the setup said routine. And routine had a way of making people careless. Sergeant Rebecca Beck Miller stood at the door, posture relaxed but alert, her eyes level with the line moving toward her. She was a United States Army military police sergeant, pay grade E5, assigned to access control for the day. To most people passing through, that detail barely registered. They saw a uniform, a clipboard, and a delay between themselves and cold air. Staff officers walked up with distracted impatience, already half inside the building before the check was complete. Contractors sighed loudly or joked under their breath about the door being guarded like it was a joke assignment. Someone muttered that her real job was keeping the air conditioning in, not keeping danger out. No one said it with cruelty, just the casual confidence of people who assume nothing important ever happened at a doorway. Beck absorbed it all without reacting, because she had learned long ago that some kinds of disrespect were quieter than insults. The command building behind her housed briefings that shaped operations far beyond the wire. But the person controlling the threshold barely existed in the eyes of those entering. Her role was treated as simple, mechanical, and easily replaced. She stayed where she was, steady and professional, holding a line that mattered more than anyone seemed willing to admit. Rebecca Beck Miller did not learn awareness from manuals or classrooms. She grew up in a neighborhood where trouble announced itself quietly, long before voices were raised or fists were thrown. You learned who to avoid by the way they stood, how their eyes moved, and whether their hands stayed visible. Words mattered less than posture, and survival depended on noticing what other people missed. That background followed her into the United States Army, even though she rarely spoke about it. Inside her military police unit, she earned a reputation for being quietly strict and dependable. She enforced standards without raising her voice and never joked at the wrong time. She did not chase praise or try to stand out, which made her easy to overlook by people who mistook silence for weakness. What set Beck apart was not aggression but pattern recognition. She noticed small things that others filtered out as noise, like changes in breathing when stress spiked or eyes that never seemed to settle. She watched how weight shifted from one foot to another and how shoulders angled without reason. To her, these details were as clear as spoken warnings, even if she never explained them out loud. There was also a reason she trusted those instincts. Earlier in her career, she had lived through an insider attack that no one liked to talk about afterward. The memory stayed with her, not as fear, but as a constant reminder of how quickly normal routines could turn deadly. She did not replay it for drama or sympathy. She carried it as discipline. That experience did not make her reckless or eager for confrontation. It taught her that hesitation often caused more harm than mistakes made early. Beck understood that professionalism meant acting before danger became obvious to everyone else. The people passing her at the door saw a sergeant doing an easy job. They never asked who she was or how she learned to see what she saw. The line outside the command building grew thicker as the afternoon wore on. Staff officers moved with clipped urgency, already thinking about the briefing, waiting inside. Contractors and interpreters followed close behind, badges out, eyes on the door, all expecting a quick pass-through. No one lingered because lingering felt unnecessary. As the crowd tightened, patience thinned. People stepped closer to each other, closing gaps that had been there only minutes before. The rhythm of checks sped up without anyone saying it should. Speed felt efficient, and efficiency felt safe. Even though it quietly replaced caution, the magnetometer chirped as one person passed through. A brief sound that barely cut through the generator noise. Someone shifted, adjusted, and tried again. And the signal cleared. It was dismissed as a belt buckle or loose metal. The kind of explanation everyone accepted because it fit the routine. The line kept moving, relieved that nothing had slowed it down. Sergeant Rebecca Beck-Miller watched it all from her position at the door. The paperwork was flawless. Identification, clean and current. Access approved without hesitation. Yet something about the movement in front of her felt off in a way that forms and badges could not explain. She noticed how bodies leaned forward, how eyes avoided settling, how one person moved differently from the rest. Around her, the assumption of safety settled in like dust. People talked quietly about schedules and meetings, confident that nothing serious ever happened at a place this controlled. Beck felt the opposite, a tightening awareness that routine was being mistaken for security. She stayed still and alert, feeling the pressure of the crowd and the weight of a moment that everyone else believed was ordinary. Rebecca focused on the man at the front of the line, and the longer she watched, the more the details refused to line up. His eyes never seemed to settle on one place, drifting past her shoulder and toward the doorway instead of meeting her gaze. His shoulders were slightly angled, not squared to the checkpoint, as if his body was already preparing to move. One hand stayed close to his waist, guarded and deliberate, while his weight rested forward on the balls of his feet. The layout around them made every detail matter more. The doorway behind her led directly into the briefing area, only a short walk from where senior leaders were gathered. The line behind the man compressed as people stepped closer, eager to get inside and out of the heat. Each step forward reduced space and increased risk, turning impatience into pressure that pushed against her judgment. Rebecca felt the familiar pull of doubt creep in. She knew how easy it was to misread someone, how one wrong call could slow everything down and draw unwanted attention. At the same time, she remembered how normal things had looked before. The last time someone decided it was probably fine. That memory did not come with images or noise, only the quiet understanding of what hesitation had cost. She told herself to check the facts again, to look for reasons to let it go. The identification was clean, the access approved, and no alarms were sounding. Still, the body language stayed wrong, and the feeling in her chest tightened instead of easing. She realized she was no longer just observing but calculating outcomes. The decision formed without drama, settling into place with uncomfortable clarity. Being wrong would mean embarrassment and delay, nothing more. Being right would mean stopping something no one else was prepared to see. As the crowd pressed closer and the doorway loomed behind her, hesitation began to feel more dangerous than action. Rebecca stepped forward just enough to close the gap, placing herself squarely in the threshold without touching the doorframe. Her posture changed in a way that was subtle but unmistakable. Shoulders set and feet planted with purpose. She spoke a simple procedural phrase, "Secondary screening," in a voice that was calm and level. It was not loud, but it carried authority because it did not ask for permission. The movement around her stopped almost at once. The line hesitated, bodies half leaning forward before freezing in place. As if everyone felt the shift without understanding it, conversations died off, and the generator seemed suddenly louder in the silence. What had been routine only seconds before now felt exposed and fragile. The man in front of her did not relax when she spoke. Instead of stepping back or raising his hands, he tried to angle past her shoulder, pushing into the space she had just claimed. Rebecca adjusted without stepping away, turning her body to block the doorway while keeping her balance centered. Her hands stayed ready, not aggressive, but positioned with intent. This was not a challenge and not a confrontation for its own sake. The goal was time, nothing more. A pause long enough to regain control of the space and stop forward motion. She could feel the crowd behind him pressing closer. Impatience, turning into pressure. Every instinct told her that letting momentum continue would be a mistake. In that still moment, the rules changed. Routine checks no longer applied, and convenience no longer mattered. Rebecca understood that whatever happened next would draw attention and judgment, and there would be no quiet reset. She stayed where she was, steady and composed, holding the line as risk replaced normalcy, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The man lunged forward instead of stopping, his movement sudden and committed. Rebecca reacted without hesitation, closing distance before momentum could carry him past her. Her hand snapped to his wrist, the one guarding his waist, locking it in place with practiced control. There was no struggle yet, only decisive contact made at exactly the right moment. She turned her body as she moved, placing herself between him and the doorway while redirecting his path away from the briefing room. Her feet slid on the gravel as she angled him toward the open space near the Jersey barriers. The motion was not about force, but leverage, using balance and position to change where the danger pointed. In less than 2 seconds, the threshold behind her was clear. Rebecca raised her voice for the first time, sharp and unmistakable. She ordered everyone back and told them to clear the line, projecting control over the sudden chaos. People stumbled away as the command registered. Space opening, where there had been pressure only moments before. She kept her grip steady, focused on keeping his hand from moving freely. As she moved, she keyed her radio and spoke in quick, controlled bursts. She alerted the Tactical Operations Center to a possible suicide device and requested explosive ordnance disposal and a quick reaction force immediately. There was no panic in her voice, only urgency shaped by training. The words were out almost as soon as the thought formed. The man resisted just enough to confirm what she already knew. Rebecca did not try to take him down or overpower him. Her priority stayed fixed on direction and distance, keeping him pointed away from the crowd and toward hard cover that could absorb force. Every step was calculated to reduce harm rather than win a fight. Time seemed to compress into fragments. The generator roared, boots scrambled, and the world narrowed to grip, angle, and space. What mattered was not bravery or strength, but early commitment. Rebecca acted before fear could slow her hands. And in those brief seconds, professionalism did what luck never could. The entry control point stayed locked down as explosive ordnance disposal personnel arrived and took control of the scene. They moved with careful precision, isolating the device and establishing clear boundaries while everyone else was pushed farther back. The magnetometer stood unused now, a quiet witness to how close routine had come to disaster. The generator kept running, steady and indifferent. As the minutes passed, the area settled into an unnatural quiet. Conversations did not restart, and no one checked their phone or complained about the delay. People stood where they were told, eyes fixed on the space they had just been rushed to enter. The heat felt heavier now, as if the air itself understood what had almost happened. Measurements were taken and shared in low voices. The distance between where the device was secured and the briefing room was counted in meters, not yards. It was close enough to make people swallow hard, close enough to turn imagination into something physical. That small number carried more weight than any alarm ever could. Sergeant Rebecca Beck Miller stood off to the side, hands relaxed, posture unchanged. She watched the process without comment, her expression calm and unreadable. There was no visible release of tension and no sign of pride. Only focus. To her, the work was not finished until everything was truly safe. Inside the command building, the meeting resumed as planned. The walls still stood. The doors still closed. And the people inside were unaware of how narrowly that normalcy had been preserved. It was not luck that held the line, but early action taken before certainty arrived. As the all-clear finally came through, relief spread quietly, mixed with shock, and the weight of what almost was settled over everyone who remained. The door to the briefing area opened, and a United States Army Brigadier General stepped out. His expression tight with irritation. His shoulders were squared, and his pace was clipped. The posture of someone used to momentum and not delays. He looked toward the entry control point, as if expecting an explanation that would justify lost minutes. Authority hung around him in the way people straightened without thinking. An aide moved quickly to meet him and spoke in plain, factual terms. There had been a device, controlled and isolated, positioned only meters from the briefing room wall. The distance was measured and verified. Close enough that the room behind the door would have taken the brunt of it. The words were delivered without drama. Just facts laid out in order. The general stopped moving. His jaw set and then eased as the information settled in, and his eyes tracked the space between the doorway and the barrier outside. The irritation drained from his posture, replaced by a stillness that carried weight. He understood the margin now. How little space had separated routine from catastrophe, and how the outcome turned on timing. His attention shifted to the side, to the sergeant standing near the checkpoint. Sergeant Rebecca Beck Miller did not move or step forward, and she did not look away. The general studied her for a moment, taking in the uniform and the position she held at the door. He asked who she was, not as a challenge, but as a necessary detail. The answer came quietly and without embellishment. This was not praise or ceremony, but acknowledgement. The system, recognizing the person who had held the line. The delay that had seemed like an inconvenience revealed itself as the reason the meeting could continue at all. The general nodded once, understanding, clear on his face, and the weight of command settled back into place with a new awareness. The people who had gathered near the entry control point did not rush back to their conversations once the danger passed. Staff officers stood a little farther apart than before, hands clasped or tucked into pockets, eyes drifting anywhere but toward the door. Contractors who had joked earlier now checked their badges again, as if seeing them differently. The space felt heavier, filled with thoughts no one wanted to say out loud. No one apologized and no one tried to explain themselves. The jokes about easy duty did not return, and neither did the casual impatience. People waited their turn without comment, stepping back when told instead of forward. Respect showed up not in words, but in distance, posture, and silence. Sergeant Rebecca Beck Miller did not acknowledge the change. She returned to her position at the door and resumed her checks with the same steady rhythm as before. Her posture stayed relaxed but alert, eyes moving calmly from one person to the next. There was no expectation in her expression, no search for approval or recognition. The difference settled in the people passing through. They slowed their steps and met her gaze now, if only briefly. Each badge exchange carried a quiet understanding that had not been there earlier. They had mistaken her role for something small, and the realization sat uncomfortably with them. Rebecca remained unchanged, because she had never done the job for acknowledgement. The work was the work, and the door was still the door. What shifted was the awareness of those who moved through it. In the silence that followed, accountability replaced dismissal, and humility took the place of ease. The doorway looked the same after everything settled, plain and unremarkable, framed by barriers and routine. People passed through it every day without thinking about what it separated. Inside was safety, planning, and authority. Outside was uncertainty, movement, and the first chance to stop something before it took shape. Sergeant Rebecca Beck Miller treated that space the same way she always had. She did not adjust her posture or soften her standards because someone noticed her now. The work stayed the work, steady and repetitive, grounded in habit and discipline. Professionalism, to her, was not something that changed with attention. The identification badge still passed from hand to hand, flashed and returned in seconds. The magnetometer still waited to chirp. Its sound easy to dismiss if no one listened closely. Only a few meters still separated the doorway from the room beyond it. That thin physical space remained the difference between normal and irreversible. What mattered was not strength or speed, but the willingness to act early. Danger rarely announces itself in dramatic ways. It shows up as small inconsistencies, quiet signals, and moments when routine asks to be trusted without question. The cost of hesitation is often invisible until it is too late. Rebecca never thought of herself as a hero, and no one needed her to be. She stood watch because that was the assignment, and she honored it with attention and restraint. The lives inside the building continued as planned, unaware of how close they came to loss. That was the point. The lesson did not come wrapped in speeches or praise. It settled in quietly, carried by respect and perspective. Some of the most important work happens where no one is looking closely enough. The door matters because someone has to hold the line there. Every day. Without applause. Before danger ever looks real.